Welcome to week one. It's been a long off season, but we're here getting ready for our first games of the week. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell to be the first to know when we have videos uploaded. Also, make sure that you follow us on Twitter at NUIC Football and on Facebook, NUIC Football Fanatics, and as well on Instagram, NUIC Football. So week one is here, and we got some good matchups this week. We actually start off with the non-conference game even, and we got what we feel are two pretty good game of the week matchups that we can take a look at further in depth as we break down the segment. But going into week one, definitely very excited that week one is finally here. I'm sure the kids are too, as they've been going through the first 2 weeks of practice, culminating in week three right now. Shane, anything that you would like to put in on week one here?
Well, like you said, it's been a long time coming. Off season was short because we covered Forreston all their way to the state championship run, but it also seemed long too. I mean, the dog days of winter drag on, you get to spring, then you're finally talking football, and it's finally here. So, I mean, it's an exciting time, week one. A few unknowns that won't take long into the season to be known. You might find out in one of our first games what a certain team is or isn't. So that's exciting, and as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, like you said, we definitely have quite a few question marks out there this season with the co-op with Du-Pec, Stockton with the new head coach. Rumor has it that Chris Thornton is now going to be an assistant coach at West Carroll. Which is great for Coach Thornton as well. So I'm glad that he's getting an opportunity to do that if that does come to fruition.
And hopefully that if one of you knows, you can let us know. I mean, I guess we could have dug in a little deeper, but yeah, I mean, this all came to light within the last few days as far as we knew. So
right, correct. And then we do have one matchup that has never taken place before in its history. So it's going to be a great week one, and we're going to see a lot of good games here this week, like you stated, and we expect to see which direction the NUIC will be going this year. First game we'll look at is AFC at River Ridge. Last year, River Ridge won this game 42-22, and what was surprising upset at that time from what we could see based off of what we saw out of AFC last year. Shane, what are your thoughts on this matchup, and who do you see coming out on top in this game?
Well, you look at last year, like you said, it was a little bit of a shocker that River Ridge played within 20 points of AFC. Going into this year, I look for maybe even a closer game yet. River Ridge, as we talked about previous, has some key guys coming back. I like the team, and going to River Ridge, it's a new start for the season. Get that confidence going. I think that's important. But for AFC, you look at it, and this is a game you kind of got to get to because AFC's schedule gets tough right after this. So I like AFC in this game, but I could see this going either way. I mean, if River Ridge plays up to their potential and what we think they might be.
Well, and that's just it. Like we stated in the preview video, both teams returned quite a bit of players. AFC has 14 seniors coming back on this team. River Ridge has quite a few players coming back. Both teams have significant impact players coming back. So it could be a very good game. I expect it to be much closer than last year's 42-22 score. And theoretically, looking at the schedule moving forward, as you stated, this could potentially be a game where if either of these teams do make the playoffs, this could be one of those pivotal matchups that either makes or breaks that opportunity to make the playoffs.
Right, and when you only play 9 regular season games in a tough conference like the NUIC is, every game's important, and you don't really think about week one as being a must-win or anything like that, but I would say that at this point, if either team wants to have that playoff potential, it's a must-win for them because, I mean, you look at AFC, they week 2 they'll have Dakota. Then they have Aquin in there and Orangeville, who we expect to be much improved over last year. So obviously this is a must-win for AFC and vice versa for River Ridge.
And I mean, you can't carry much from last season into the new season, but Orangeville did beat both of these teams last season on their way to what would become a 4-5 record. So,
right,
I mean,
so you'd expect similar results if the team is progressing like you think they will be.
Correct. I mean, because like we said, both teams return a lot of the same players that played in this matchup last year. So it's going to be very interesting. I believe this game did take place after River Ridge was finally able to use Marcelo Diaz in that game, which was one of the reasons we were like, wow, where did River Ridge come from?
Right.
And who is this Marcelo Diaz? Although he did actually play the year before, but unfortunately for him, he actually had to sit out the majority of the regular season until week 7. So, which that's when you start seeing River Ridge start to improve and actually build up a couple of wins. But AFC is a very capable team this year. A lot of good players coming back. A lot of kids coming back that are 3-year starters. Somewhat of what's going to be similar with River Ridge as well. This game is taking place at River Ridge.
Nice facility.
It is. And Shane, I don't know about you, but I think I'm going to take River Ridge by a score in this game.
And I can't disagree with you. I'll take AFC because that's what I had previously picked and running down my schedule, but I could obviously see that going either way.
Next game will take us to Warren, where Stockton and Warren will face off. Last year, Stockton won this game 54-6. There was a bit of a bigger blowout than we had anticipated last year, with Warren coming off of back-to-back playoff seasons and upsetting Stockton in the same realm just the year before. But Warren is definitely decimated when it comes to player personnel, especially with Rockford Our Lady of the Sacred Heart leaving their co-op with Warren and starting up their own team this year. Stockton is going to be a big question mark, much like we said in our intro. A lot of good, talented players, don't get me wrong, but a large glaring hole of question marks as well. New head coach and a lot of skilled position players that need to fill roles that are vacated along with the offensive and defensive lines.
Right. And holes are different in the game compared to practice. I mean, you can plug your guys in practice and everything looks fine, and when you get to that game situation, it's totally different when you're finally facing off somebody that you don't know. But like you said, Warren's down this year compared to what they've been. I mean, not only last year with that, but a couple years ago after the playoff appearances. And Stockton, like you said, is a little bit unknown. Running a new system now that Horton's out of there. So don't get me wrong, they might have some issues, but I think it's a good time to play, I don't want to say it, but a lesser quality opponent just to kind of help maybe build that confidence and maybe get some experience on what you're trying to do and get the kids some game time. I mean, you benefit from, let's face it, you benefit from playing a lesser quality opponent under new coaching here.
Yes, because you know that you can come into that season. You can say, hey, we got this game on our schedule week 1. Granted, Stockton-Warren's a huge rivalry.
Right.
But that rivalry, I don't feel will live up to that moniker as a great game this year, much like it was last year.
Right. And, 54-6 last year, it could happen. I don't anticipate it being quite like it was last year, but I definitely like Stockton big in this game. But stranger things have happened, as many good things as Stockton has going for it because of all these changes. There could also be the bad. Well, we don't exactly have everything down that we want to. Kids in the system, seniors playing under 4 years of, one system and have it change for another. mean, that could work against them too. I mean, obviously, I like Stockton in this game, but you never know.
Well, and that's just it. You know, for the past few years, at least since 2012, since the end of the 2012 season, pretty much, Stockton has been a spread offensive team
Right.
because you've had a Fox at quarterback. I mean, granted, 2012 had Fox at quarterback too, a Fox, one of the three, but at the same token, they were a very physical running team in 2012. They haven't been anything near physical the last few years. They've been highly skilled and talented, but nothing on the physical side of things. I don't see Stockton still being as physical as we're used to seeing them be coming into 2017. Coach Snyder has a lot on his hands as far as what kind of system he's going to run, but if he does want to run a spread-type offense, then he's going to have to find a quarterback, because I don't see a quarterback in the Stockton system that has the capabilities that Hayden Fox had last year.
Well, and that's just that you can, I mean, college and high school are completely different for that reason. I mean, college, you can implement your system and recruit kids to fit your system. Or in high school, you get these kids that you want to run a system with, but you ultimately have to run the system that fits the kids best.
Right. So, Shane, I think Stockton's going to win this game, and I think they're going to win big, and that's going to be a good thing for them going forward into Week 2 against Marquette.
I agree 100%.
Our non-conference matchup this week brings us to Hiawatha at Aquin. The last time these two teams met was the 1987 second-round playoff game, where Aquin won that 34-6 back in their heyday as they were coming off of their second state title. Shane, Hiawatha comes out of the Northeastern Athletic Conference, a conference that has seen a couple of their teams move to 8-man football due to low numbers. Chicago Hope actually move out to the South Suburban Catholic League. And, of course, we look at some of their teams, you know, we've had high criticism on the NAC for quite a while now.
Right, and rightfully so. I mean, outside of Ottawa and Marquette, there really hasn't been much to talk about in the NEAC. I mean, if you don't recall, for our viewers, South Beloit struggled heavily in the NUIC, goes to the NEAC their first year, and somehow goes 4-5 and barely misses out on the playoffs. I mean, that's the type of disadvantage that conference compared to the NUIC is. I mean, obviously we saw Ottawa and Marquette go far into the playoffs and ultimately meet their demise in Forreston. But outside of them, they really didn't see tough teams. I mean, they went 7-3 last year, lost in that first round to Leroy. But, I mean, Kirkland...
Pretty handily, too.
Right. I mean, as far as this game goes against Aquin, I don't anticipate any problems for the Bulldogs, but it is the first game of the year. High expectations for the Bulldogs. You got to live up to what you think you are. Anything's possible.
And that's just it. The Bulldogs have a lot to live up to. Take the fact that Hiawatha lost to Leroy in the first round last year, and Aquin beat Leroy in the second round.
Right.
Also, this game will be taking place at Conley Field in Freeport, Aquin's home field, and Aquin is always a very tough opponent, regardless of their talent level when they're playing at home in Aquin. So I see the Bulldogs needing, obviously, to come out of the gates early and often,
right,
and do what they're supposed to do, get the game set to tone, and basically take care of business. Chalk this up like you would if it were college football. This is your NCAA Division I AA team that you're playing.
For a confidence boost.
Yeah. This is your confidence booster game to start the season.
And for me, it's kind of exciting in a way. I mean, not necessarily the game itself, but it's kind of nice. I mean, we've talked for many years it'd be nice to get out of the conference and play some different teams outside of the playoffs, obviously. And, you know, every week going forward, we'll have that with the upstate side because of with Du-Pec forming, but I mean it's exciting because you get to see some new teams.
Right, and I mean we've seen it a few years ago where when the Northwest side was the same way, and you got to see teams like Fisher and Shullsburg and Benton Scales Mound, just to name a few of the teams that we've seen other teams play. I mean, heck, even when I was in school, we played Biggsville, and they're all the way down by Macomb. So, it is cool to get out of the area. Granted, this isn't really too far out of the area because you think back in 1999, Kirkland, Hiawatha was part of the original part of the NUIC, which was the Upstate Illini Conference in the East Division. But during that time period of that 5-year run of the Upstate Illini Conference, Aquin and Hiawatha never actually met up with each other.
Right. So, definitely a fun game, but I see the Bulldogs coming out pretty easily in this game.
I do too. They just need to come out prepared and execute that game plan, and they should be just fine. Our crossover matchup of the week is Milledgeville at Amboy. This is the first ever meeting between the Missiles and the Clippers. Shane, last year Milledgeville was 5-5, losing the first round of the playoffs, and Amboy came over from the Three Rivers Conference, and what we anticipated them being very competitive in the NUIC Northwest, however, found out that they were not that.
Right.
How do you see this matchup taking place, considering the fact that outside of Stockton and Aquin winning considerable games against lesser Northwest opponents, but the rest of the Northwest going overall 7-2 against the Upstate last year? How do you think this crossover is going to play out?
Well, that's just it. I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to use that as a point. I mean, as the years have gone over since the crossover, I mean, it has been a Northwest dominance. Now, granted, this is probably going to be one of the more closer matchups of the crossover this year. But for me, it's a tale of two different teams. We have talked about Milledgeville being better than last year, and we kind of see Amboy right around where they were. We discussed that in our preview. Amboy, I don't know if we had high expectations for them last year. They certainly, down in their area, had high press expectations, and I don't know if that was just not necessarily being up to par with the coverage on all the other teams in the conference, or they just thought that maybe Amboy underperformed. I mean, Amboy was a big team last year.
They were very good size.
I mean, in warm-ups and stuff, you saw them and you were thinking, okay, maybe, Amboy is the real deal, and they had some great athletes, still do, but they just weren't able to put it together. And then, we talked about Milledgeville going 5-5, close playoff game against Iowa Marquette. And obviously you group a bunch of returners with the conference championship at the first off level. I think that just bodes to be too much for Amboy, and I like Milledgeville in this matchup.
I do. I mean, I agree with you. I do like Milledgeville in this matchup, and it's not because Amboy doesn't have athletes. We know they do. I mean, Amboy has been and still is a very much football town.
Yeah.
And based off of what they have coming back, Amboy has very good players coming back. It's just that Milledgeville has a little bit more.
Right.
And like you said, Milledgeville did make the playoffs. Had Amboy made the playoffs, which they didn't even get out of the NUIC Northwest, had they made the playoffs, they would have fell into Class 1A last year.
Right.
Because they were right at the cutoff point with their enrollment. Milledgeville took what was a back-to-back semifinal season for Ottawa Marquette and took the Crusaders to a 9-6 game. That came down to that last second field goal.
Right.
Yeah.
We're moving on from that, I think.
Yes.
But we're not.
And that's just it. I mean, we have moved on. It's 2017. But like you said, we have not moved on because that was such a gut-wrenching loss for the Missiles in a game that they could have potentially pulled out as a huge underdog in that game.
Right, and then all hypothetically speaking, then you get different matchups in the playoffs. I think that would have been a matchup with Dakota coming off a high win. If they happen to beat Ottawa Marquette, who knows, maybe they beat Dakota and so forth. And I don't know if we still talk about the missed field goal because our jabbing back and forth with Ottawa Marquette fans on what they think their team is great and all that. And I mean, it's fun to deal with, but what ifs and it didn't happen. So,
and honestly,
bottom line is they lost the game.
Yeah, I mean, playing with the Marquette fans was a lot of fun. We got some. We do have some good friends with the Marquette Crusaders, right. And it was a lot of fun playing back and forth. But to be pushed to the limit when you're undefeated
on a 5-4 team
by a 5-4 team out of the Upstate Conference, that tells me that you're not one of two things. You're not a true 9-0 team,
right,
or you're not truly prepared for this game. And we do know that Max Donahue obviously got hurt in that game. So obviously that took a lot of wind out of Marquette sails when they saw their running back and linebacker go down with what was a very bad injury. Put him out for the rest of the season, unfortunately. But
New year, new missiles.
Yes, and Milledgeville has a lot coming back. And like you, I like Milledgeville in this game. Forreston at Du-Pec is the next game we'll take in here as in our outlook for Week 1. Last year, Forreston beat Pectonica 44-0 as their last tune-up game going into the playoffs before their awesome playoff run that led to their second state title. With the addition of Durand in the Du-Pec co-op, can we see some different aspects of Du-Pec in this game with Forreston coming into Week 1?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. Because, the head coach has taught these kids at a lower level for Du-Pec. Obviously, junior high to varsity is completely different. But when you start looking at these programs who have the utmost expectations and championships, they have lower level programs put in place. So that it might not be this year for Du-Pec, but the fact that they have a program and building up obviously bodes well for the future. Forreston obviously speaks for itself. I mean, if you didn't watch the preview, we picked them to go 9-0. It starts here. One of the benefits that Du-Pec would have had going into this game, you look at the possibility of a complacent championship team, but unfortunately for Du-Pec, Forreston is not complacent. We've had interactions with people on the team from Forreston and doing our due diligence on researching this year, and the fact that they're not overlooking Du-Pec, that's a problem for Du-Pec.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm not meaning to laugh, but Forreston is coming off of their state championship year, and like you just stated, they are completely focused on Du-Pec right now.
So that's a problem.
It is a problem because how many teams do you know come off of a state championship year and their number one focus is the team that was 0-9 in the conference last year?
Right, and I just want to be clear on one thing. I'm not taking anything away from the talent on Du-Pec or anything like that. We've talked about the athletes that are coming for Du-Pec. We anticipate a decent team this year. The problem is that it is your first year in a co-op. You might have some outside politics that need to sort themselves out as the year goes on. And as the years go on, it doesn't happen overnight. You got to buy into the system. You got to buy into the coach. Obviously, social media allows us to see what's going on. It looks like there is a good system in place, getting the communities together, practices during the off season. Just everything that you would hope to see going on. So I think that bodes well for Du-Pec in the future. The problem is you start the season off against what we anticipate to be another state championship team.
Yes. And what we know will be the number 1 ranked team in the state when the AP polls come out later this week.
Right.
So, they are a state championship team. If Du-Pec can beat Forreston, it'll be a miracle. It'll be a huge, huge upset across the entire state.
It'll be Russia-U.S. 1980 Olympic game.
Exactly. And I'm on page with you, man. Du-Pec has the athletes. You guys have a lot of good athletes, a lot of good players. You have a good coaching system in place. The problem is that you're going to be learning new schemes. Now, how perfect are you going to be with new schemes in a 3-week time period compared to Forreston, who's been working under the same head coach for going on 10 years now?
Right.
Their system is more diplomated than what yours is. I mean, it's just
the way it is.
Yeah. I think that the score itself, I mean, granted, Forreston kind of laid off the hammer on Pectonic last year when they beat them 44-0. They easily could have made that a 60 or 70 point game had they wanted to. But I think that score will definitely be a little bit more surprising than what people think, but I still feel Forreston's going to roll in this game.
I see the same thing. Obviously, it's a new year. I mean, you're replacing some guys, so Forreston might not be the well-oiled machine right off the bat, but definitely going forward, this is just another step on getting to where they want to be.
EPC at East Dubuque is a game that should be a good one. Last year, EPC won this game 24-13, in which was a critical game for East Dubuque, as this played out in Week 9. So East Dubuque needed to win this game in order to make the playoffs, or at least have the potential opportunity to make the playoffs, in which they did not. But the game was much closer than people thought, especially considering the fact that the previous 3 games East Dubuque had played prior to this EPC matchup, they didn't even score a single point. They went through games where they lost to West Carroll 43-0, Lena Winslow 44-0, and absolutely got buried by Forreston 62-0.
Right. I mean, this is an interesting Week 1 matchup for sure, based on where we see these teams going this year. EPC we see is falling down a little bit from last year. And, I mean, when I say that, you look at EPC last year and you don't really, I mean, yeah, they won a lot of games, but collectively they didn't really have that wow factor, even with their wins that they did have.
Their wow factor came in Week 1 against Lena Winslow. I mean, that was their wow factor last year.
So, and then you group that with this year's East Dubuque team that has a lot coming back. We see more improvement. Definitely could be a toss-up game. EPC has had history, not necessarily at East Dubuque, but going to the further northwest part of the conference and struggling a little bit over the years. So definitely a game that could garner a lot of attention.
I think so, especially considering the amount of returners both teams have.
Right.
East Dubuque, don't fool yourself. East Dubuque has a lot of returners off of last year's team. Granted, they went 4-5, and to me, them 3 games that I mentioned where they got absolutely blown out and shut out, 2 of them I could say, yeah, okay.
You got beat.
But the game against West Carroll, I'm sorry, but West Carroll was not 43 points better than you.
Right.
You just straight up quit.
Right.
And that cannot happen in the NUIC Northwest if you want to make the playoffs. It just can't.
Right.
I mean, we talked about it in our preview video. The Northwest Division has put out 6 of the last 7 state champions.
Right. Definitely not a...
So if you want to make the playoffs,
right,
you're playing state championship quality opponents right here, right now, in real time. And to make the playoffs, you got to play with them, and you got to beat them. But also to win state, you got to be the best to be the best.
Right, and that's what we've talked about so much, is this conference prepares you by the time you're to the playoffs. I mean, the playoffs aren't easy by any means, but Forreston last year, I think playing in a tough conference obviously helped them. I mean, you play your toughest games before you even get to the playoffs. I mean, the conference itself grooves you for a state title run.
Well, you look at their regular season compared to their state championship run, it was
Right.
a cakewalk.
So, I mean, for East Dubuque, it's important. I think East Dubuque, if they're going to win this game, they got to score first because it goes back to that confidence factor. I mean, it'd be easy to say, "Oh no, here we go again." And for EPC, I mean, you'll lose everything that your team was about last year. It's going to be all about replacing Haverland, Fisher. I mean, you got some holes to fill, so we'll see what happens. But ultimately, I like EPC on the road.
You know, you said it there when you were touching in on the snowball effect. If EPC does happen to score first in this game, East Dubuque cannot sit there and drop their heads immediately and say, "Here we go again."
Right.
You got to get back on the saddle. You got knocked off. You got to get back up there, get back on, and march right back down the field and answer.
Right.
Don't be discouraged because you get scored on. You're going to get scored on. How often do we see shutouts in high school football games? The only times we see it is when that team is that inferior to the team they're playing against. So, EPC, I do feel, will win this game because they have the experience under their belts. East Dubuque has a lot of returning players. I can easily see a two-score game similar to what we saw last year. I do like the fact that the Warriors are playing at home in this game, but I still think EPC will pull it out. West Carroll at Lee win. Last year, Lena Winslow won this game 37-14. This game, ironically, too, coming in Game 9 last year, where West Carroll needed to win in order to have that potential opportunity to make the playoffs. But Lena Winslow decidedly shut that door pretty quickly.
Right. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong, so if somebody out there sees this, please correct me, but I think that game was actually close for a little while. It was fine. I mean, I think it was close towards halftime before Lena Winslow actually finally decided, okay,
I believe you're right.
Done screwing around, let's go get the win. This is a very interesting game. Could have very easily been our Northwest game of the week. We'll get to that in a little bit, but we anticipate a very good Lena Winslow team, and we anticipate a decent to good West Carroll team. So,
really, the biggest questions for West Carroll, okay, and we touched on this in our preview video, is West Carroll cannot, or at least it's not that they can't, but more that they haven't played with the top 4 teams in the NUIC outside of EPC 2 years ago when they went 2-7.
Right.
EPC rebounded quickly from a down year, much like we've seen Galena do many times throughout the years. However, West Carroll has not been able to touch that upper echelon of the Northwest team since they've become West Carroll, and even prior to that when it was still Savannah and Thompson.
Right.
And Mount Carroll and Savannah barely ever touched the NWIC teams or the Upstate Illini Conference teams.
Right. And a way I kind of break this down is for West Carroll, I mean, you know, you're always the bridesmaid, not the bride. Or the way I look at it, even more so, I kind of put them in a similar situation to Aquin and Stockton as to what they would be had they played in the Northwest on a regular basis. If you put West Carroll in the Upstate, 1, 2, 3, flip a coin, you're probably right there. You come over to the Northwest side, and you can't beat EPC, you can't beat Lena Winslow, you can't beat Dakota, and you can't beat Forreston on a regular basis.
I mean, you look back at 2015, West Carroll made the playoffs, lost in the first round to eventual state champ, 22-0, beat EPC that year, but they still only finished 5-4 that year.
Right. So I anticipate good things for West Carroll this year. I really do. I just don't think it starts in week 1.
I don't either. The only thing is with this matchup, Lena Winslow is notoriously slow to start. You've seen it in so many years. Their state championship year of 2010, they lost in the first game of the year. 2009, they went to the semifinals, lost in the first game of the year. 2013, they won state. They lost 3 games that year.
We were talking whether or not they were going to make the playoffs because they had a close game against Aquin that they ultimately won. But, 3-loss team.
Lena Winslow is just they've only had 2 teams that have gone 9-0. And the furthest the one went was the 2006 team that lost in the quarterfinals to a Three Rivers team.
Right. So, I think Lena Winslow can't afford to start slow in this game. They're at home, tough place to play. I like Lena Winslow at home.
I do. The Lee Wynn Athletic Bowl is a tough place to play. West Carroll is coming up there to play the Panthers. The Panthers, I feel, will be ready for this game. And I can see them easily winning by 2 to 3 scores, but I would not be surprised to see West Carroll play with Lena Winslow through the majority of this game either. So I expect this to be a very good game, but I do expect Lena Winslow to win it kind of big. So we'll see what happens. Our upstate game of the week brings us to Polo, where they are going to be playing host to the Orangeville Broncos. Last year, this game was won by Polo 41-14. Again, another matchup happening in Week 1 that happened in Week 9 last year, with Orangeville also having the opportunity or potential of the opportunity to make the playoffs had they won that game. Shane, this game is going to be played in Marco land. What do you think the Broncos are going to do to be able to play with the Marcos this year?
Throw the ball. Plain and simple. Orangeville needs to do what they do best. Last year showed signs of improvement for Orangeville, and I really think, to be honest, they're going to continue to improve, and you look at Polo and not so much. This is a very meaningful game because if you watched our upstate preview, we're very high on Orangeville this year. So if they're going to get to where we think they could get to, it starts with Polo. If they don't beat Polo, we talked in previous games on the snowball effect. It kind of carries that with a little bit because I think, yes, we have high expectations for Orangeville, but I don't know if anybody has higher expectations for Orangeville than Orangeville.
Well, and that's just true. Like you just stated, this is a big game for Orangeville and Polo.
Right.
Starting off the season. Looking at Polo's schedule, once they hit Week 5, the schedule, outside of what we anticipate Kirkland, Hiawatha being, the schedule is going to get much tougher. And I could see them playing with Hiawatha, even though they're from the NAC. But if you look at the Polo schedule, Polo also, coming into Week 5, has played probably 3 of their 4 toughest competitors coming into Week 5. So this game is definitely more advantageous to win for Orangeville looking at it.
Right.
Really, this game is going to be similar to a previous game that we mentioned with West Carroll and Lena Winslow, where if West Carroll can pull out a win, that could propel them to the playoffs. Orangeville and Polo, regardless of who wins, granted, this one's not a must-win game, but it's definitely that game that could be the potential game turner as far as them making the playoffs going forward.
Right. And, we're so accustomed to seeing, Orangeville had a few good years, I guess it's probably been, 9, 8 years ago now that they finally beat Dakota in that first round game. And, you've seen a Polo team that was just remarkable that ultimately lost to Stark County just a few years ago. But the tide has slowly shifted. We're moving away from that kind of Polo football We're moving away from the run-heavy Broncos into the spread offense. Orangeville has a stellar quarterback that we've talked about in the conference, and you get all of Orangeville's pieces. It's a big game for Orangeville. I like Orangeville on the road. Obviously that's a huge score to reverse this year from 41-14, but I like Orangeville.
Well, it is a huge score, and you talk about big quarterbacks, and who you're referring to is Austin Guy, obviously, of the Broncos. But you got to look at Polo's offense. They have Braden Solto coming back at quarterback, who was a sophomore starter last year, will be a junior. Guy's a senior, Solto's a junior. But Polo is also going to go to a spread-type offense this year themselves to try to reduce down the amount of injuries. So you're going to see Solto airing out the ball a lot more this year, I feel. He does have a complimentary back in the backfield with Reed Taylor, a guy who is going to be very physical. But I'm going to go opposite of you. Being that this game is in Polo, with the big win, I do like Polo in this matchup. Our Northwest game of the week is going to bring us Galena at Dakota. Shane, last year this game, Dakota won 36-34, in which really was a surprise based off of how Galena performed against the upper teams of the Northwest Division compared to how Dakota performed against those same teams, with the exception of Lena Winslow, which absolutely destroyed Dakota in Dakota. But that 36-34 score told us one of two things. Either Dakota wasn't what they thought, which we already knew they were a Jekyll and Hyde type of team on a roller coaster ride, or Galena severely underperformed from what they could have been in 2016.
Well, I think it's a combination of both. Obviously, like you said, Dakota was hit and miss, and Galena, I don't know what exactly happened to Galena. I don't know if anybody does. But bottom line is they didn't put the wins together. By winning 36-34, we put this out on Twitter. That was only Dakota's fourth win since 2011 that came with one score or less. Dakota is a team that either wins big or they lose.
That's very true.
And that has been the story of the Indians since they won the state championship in 2011. I don't know if that's coincidence or if that's coaching holdovers from the years. I mean, whatever the case may be. For me, this game could go one of two ways. We've got people out in Galena who are actually high on Galena this year saying, we're ready to rebound, whatever. And then we also have people really high on Dakota saying we're better than we were last year. If this is a close game, could those stats mean anything for this game? I mean, every year is different. I don't put too much stock into it. It was more of a interesting factor. But also we talked, when was the last time Dakota beat Galena 2 times in a row? We don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just it. I mean, we were trying to pull up stats even earlier before we started our video session tonight, and we could not find...
Before IHSA. Let's put it that way.
Before IHSA's 1996 record book online, where Dakota beat Galena in back-to-back years. I mean, we know that Galena owns pretty much the entire conference for the past 33 years. But
and Dakota was terrible 33 years ago.
Yeah, Dakota wasn't good until 1985, and then it took a while for them to get going into the late 80s and early 90s. And it was really the late 90s where Dakota started to take off.
Right, and then finally got to where they are now and kind of hit a hiccup and hopefully back to where they want to be.
Right. So, I mean, this game has a lot to be the game of the week based off of last year's scores, with one very mediocre team and another team that made the second round of the playoffs. And then you look at the fact that, like you just stated, Galena hasn't missed back-to-back playoffs since 1984. That's 33 years ago.
It's a long time.
And Dakota has never beat Galena in back-to-back years as far back as we can look at.
Right.
And I would say that's at least back to 1984 minimum.
Right. But, I mean, as far as this game within itself, you look for Dakota under another year of Coach Freed getting his system even implemented more. I mean, it's been well known. He's been quoted in the press as saying, we didn't have to take a lot of time this offseason getting the kids to where we want to be because it's another year. That definitely plays out in Dakota's favor.
It does. And being that Dakota is at home, Dakota has always played tough at home. So I do feel the Indians will win this game.
Yeah, and as I looked at the schedule when I made my predictions earlier in the year, I might have been more leaning towards Galena in this game, but I just, after everything that we listed in the preview and getting a feel out, I can't disagree with that. I'll take Dakota at home too, but definitely could be one of those games that leaves us wondering what Galena is and what Dakota is as well.
Yeah, I mean, I expect a great game in Dakota on Friday night. All right, so that gives you our preview and our predictions of our Week 1 matchups. Shane, I feel that with Week 1 underway, it would be a great week that we all take the game in together.
Let's do it.
So this week will probably be the only week of the year that we actually get opportunity until the playoffs to actually take a full game in together. We need to do it in order to do some things,
work out the kinks.
Yeah.
Kind of retrain ourselves as to what we're doing.
So we're going to sit here and take in the Dakota game at Dakota against Galena. Really, the big reason is because we want to see what Galena really is going to be this year and see what they can potentially become because, it's been 3 decades since we've seen Galena lose back-to-back playoff seasons.
Right, and with you mentioning that, if Galena comes out and plays Dakota tough or even wins, that could throw a wrench into everything that we've put into our summer prep. So, obviously, a big game that we want to see, and obviously, sometimes the final score doesn't always tell the whole story, so, we'll get a pretty good look at what Galena is, and then obviously going into next week, we got huge games, so
we do.
This is fun.
It is. And it's not that we can't get to Polo or we can't get to
Lena
Winslow. It's just the fact that, 1, we want to work together for one game this year. 2, we're all interested to see what Galena will be so we can bring you guys better input coming into the season.
Right.
So until we see Galena play,
it's hard to do that.
It's hard to do that. So that is where we're going this week. So if you happen to see us out at the game, don't be afraid to stop by and say hi. As always, root for the NUIC. Well, we know how to work and we know how to play. We're from the country and we like it that way.